Lucas Hayes wiped his hands on an old rag, the grease leaving dark smudges against his rough skin. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the open garage doors of Ashford Auto Repair, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. The scent of motor oil hung thick in the air, mingling with the distant aroma of fresh bread from Callahan's bakery down the street. He sighed and glanced at the rusted Chevrolet he'd been working on since noon. Another long, uneventful day. Turning toward the clock on the wall, 6:30 p.m. Time to lock up. Stepping outside, he took a deep breath. The streets of Rivermere, Montana stretched before him, lined with houses he'd seen his whole life. The sidewalks were quiet except for a few distant voices, the town settling into its usual evening rhythm. Across the street, Mrs. Calloway, his elderly neighbor, was watering her rose bushes. She nodded at him, just as she had every evening for the past 8 years. "Another long day, Lucas?" she called. He forced a small smile. "Same as always, Mrs. Calloway." Routine. It was all the same. Every day, every week, every year. His apartment sat above Holloway's Hardware, the old wooden staircase groaning under his weight as he climbed. Inside, the familiar scent of motor oil and stale takeout greeted him. Tossing his keys onto the counter, he caught sight of the crooked calendar pinned to the wall. July 15th, 2024. No different from July 14th, or the 13th. Running a hand through his damp hair, he stepped toward the fridge, but something caught his eye. A flyer taped to the door. Annual Rivermere Night Market. Tonight. Lucas hesitated. He never went to these things. But tonight, something about it felt different. Maybe a walk wouldn't hurt. By the time he reached the town square, the market was in full swing. Strings of twinkling lights hung overhead, casting a soft glow on the cobbled streets. Stalls lined the plaza, vendors calling out their wares, handmade candles, fresh pastries, second-hand books, old trinkets. Lucas wandered between the booths, hands in his pockets, letting the warm air and lively chatter wash over him. At one table, he paused to run his fingers over the spines of leather-bound books, their covers cracked with age. Next to them, a collection of vintage pocket watches ticked softly beneath the warm lantern light. "You've got a good eye," said a voice. Lucas looked up to see a sharp-eyed woman behind the stall, her silver-streaked hair tied back. "They don't make them like this anymore," Lucas said, picking up a watch. The woman smiled knowingly. Some things were built to last. He considered buying it, but his attention was pulled elsewhere. A stall at the far end of the market, nearly hidden between a cart of scarves and a rack of antique maps. Something about it felt off. He moved toward it without thinking. The wooden table was small, almost forgotten in the bustle of the market. Its surface was covered in strange trinkets, rusted compasses, old keys, and glass bottles filled with swirling colors. Lucas felt a small shiver run down his spine. A low, gravelly voice broke through his thoughts. "Looking for something special, son?" He startled slightly, turning toward the vendor, an old man, his face mostly hidden beneath a long white beard. His gray eyes pierced through the dim light, sharp despite his age. Lucas hesitated. "Just looking." The old man chuckled. "Maybe you just haven't found what you're looking for yet." He reached beneath the table and pulled out a bottle. Lucas froze. The glass shifted in color, an impossible blend of deep blues, greens, and violets, as if it contained a storm trapped within. Strange symbols twisted across its surface, intricate and unfamiliar. His chest tightened. "What is it?" Lucas asked, his voice quieter now. The old man smiled faintly. "Ah, this one's been waiting for you." Lucas frowned. "Waiting for me?" The man turned the bottle slowly in his hands. "Some things choose their owners, boy. This one's had its eye on you since you walked in." He held it out. Yours for $20. Lucas hesitated. He wasn't the type to buy random junk. And yet, a strange warmth crept into his fingertips. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a crumpled $20 bill. Before he could second-guess himself, he handed it over. The moment the money left his hand, the bottle pulsed faintly, as if it had just taken a breath. "Enjoy," the old man said with a cryptic smile. Lucas looked up to ask another question, but the stall was gone. The walk home passed in a blur. Lucas barely remembered unlocking his door before setting the bottle down on his kitchen counter. Under the harsh fluorescent light, the swirling colors inside it seemed even more alive. Running his fingers over the symbols, he noticed something strange. They didn't look like letters, more like constellations. A sharp static jolt shot up his arm. "Ah!" He flinched, knocking the bottle off balance. It wobbled, teetering on the counter's edge. Lucas lunged for it, catching the smooth glass. Pop! The cork flew off with a burst of blinding light. Lucas staggered backward, shielding his eyes as golden energy flooded the room. For a few seconds, all he could hear was a low hum, like the universe itself exhaling. Then, silence. Lucas blinked, trying to clear the spots from his vision. And that's when he saw her. Floating just inches above his kitchen floor was a woman. No, something more. Her skin shimmered, tiny stars flickering beneath the surface. Her silver hair floated weightlessly around her as if she stood in zero gravity. And her eyes... Lucas's breath caught. They weren't human. They were infinite, swirling with galaxies and distant nebulae. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the being tilted her head, regarding him with quiet curiosity. When she spoke, her voice resonated, layered with harmonics that sent shivers down his spine. "I am Selene." Lucas couldn't move. "You have awakened me from my slumber, mortal. By the ancient cosmic laws, I am bound to grant you 3 wishes." His back hit the fridge, sending a cascade of takeout menus fluttering to the floor. What?" Selene's brow furrowed slightly. "Have I used the incorrect language? My translation matrix may require calibration." She waved a hand. A tingling sensation rushed through Lucas's ears. "Is this better?" she asked. Her voice now perfectly matched her lips. Smooth and effortless, as if she had spoken his language her entire life. Lucas swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. His heart pounded against his ribs, a rapid, uneven rhythm that refused to settle. His brain fought to rationalize what was happening, but nothing about this moment fit into the realm of logic. Yes, but... He took a shaky breath, his voice barely above a whisper. What are you? For the first time since she appeared, a flicker of amusement danced across her features. Her glowing eyes studied him, swirling with colors that seemed to shift and deepen the longer he looked. "I am Selene," she said, tilting her head slightly, as if this alone should explain everything. Lucas clenched his jaw. "That doesn't answer my question." Selene's lips curved ever so slightly, the hint of a mischievous smile playing at the edges. "I am a quantum Jinn, a being of energy and possibility," she said, her voice rich with something ancient and boundless, as if she had seen the birth and death of stars. "Your kind might call me a genie, though that term lacks nuance." Lucas stared at her, barely hearing the words. His mind reeled, struggling to process the impossible sight before him. The room suddenly felt too small, the air thick and charged. "But genies aren't real." Selene raised an elegant eyebrow. "And yet," she said, spreading her hands gracefully, "here I am." As she spoke, the air crackled around her, tiny flecks of stardust shimmering in her wake. The glow of her skin pulsed slightly brighter, illuminating the dim kitchen for a brief moment before fading back to a soft radiance. Lucas exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his hair. He should have run. He should have panicked. But instead, all he could do was stand there, staring at the celestial being floating in his kitchen. And somehow, knowing with absolute certainty, his life would never be the same again. Lucas's legs felt like lead, his pulse hammering in his ears. He wasn't sure how long he stood there, just staring. His mind screamed at him to question everything, to tell himself this was some kind of elaborate hallucination. Maybe he was asleep, dreaming. But the glowing woman in front of him, her galaxy-filled eyes watching him with quiet amusement, was very real. His throat worked as he swallowed, forcing himself to speak. "You said, I get 3 wishes?" Celine gave a slow nod. "Yes. By the cosmic laws that govern my kind, I am bound to fulfill 3 of your desires. But be warned, wishes are powerful, and power is never without consequence." Lucas's brows knitted together. "And after the 3rd wish? What happens then?" The amusement in her expression faded slightly. "Then I return to my bottle until I am summoned again." Something tightened in Lucas's chest. "That's it? You just go back, waiting for someone else to wake you up?" Celine held his gaze, something ancient and heavy flickering in her cosmic eyes. "That is the way it has always been." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, exhaling hard. He should have been excited. This was every fairy tale come to life. He could ask for anything. Wealth, power, knowledge. And yet, all he could think about was the way she said it, as if this was a fate she had come to accept, but never chosen. His stomach churned. That doesn't seem fair. Celine blinked at him, her lips parting slightly in what might have been surprise. Fairness is a mortal construct, Lucas Hayes. The universe does not deal in fairness, it only balances what is given and taken. Lucas frowned. But you're not just some mindless force of the universe. He gestured vaguely at her, searching for the right words. You think, you feel, you have a name. You shouldn't have to just sit in a bottle for centuries, waiting for someone to use you like some kind of cosmic vending machine. Celine tilted her head, her expression unreadable. You are not like most mortals, she murmured. Lucas shrugged, but he couldn't ignore the way her words sent a small, unexpected thrill through him. Yeah, well, most mortals probably don't have a glowing woman who talks like a philosopher in their kitchen, he muttered. Celine laughed. A soft, melodic sound, like stardust drifting through the air. Lucas found himself smiling despite himself, and just like that, the panic that had been coiling in his chest loosened. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't as terrifying as it seemed. Lucas leaned against the counter, rubbing his jaw in thought. All right, he said slowly. Let's say I do make a wish. Can I ask for anything? Celine nodded. So long as it does not break the foundational laws. No resurrecting the dead, forcing love, or causing direct harm. Beyond that, the possibilities are limitless. Lucas exhaled. He could wish for money, for success, for a life beyond this town, but none of those things felt right. His eyes drifted toward the old radio sitting on the counter, its metal casing scratched and dented. It had belonged to his father, a man he had lost to a heart attack when he was 16. The radio hadn't worked in years, but Lucas had never been able to throw it away. A lump formed in his throat. Can you fix things? He asked, his voice quieter now. Celine's glowing gaze followed his to the radio. Fix? Yeah, like machines, objects. Could you restore something that's broken? Celine stepped forward, placing her fingertips against the radio. For a moment, her skin seemed to glow brighter, the symbols on her arms shifting like they were alive. This is different, she murmured. Lucas frowned. Different how? Selene traced the surface of the radio, her expression oddly gentle. A wish is not needed to repair this. Lucas blinked. Wait, what? Before he could react, the radio hummed to life, the old speakers crackling with the sound of a familiar song, a song his father used to play when he was a kid. His chest tightened. Selene withdrew her hand. It was never truly broken, just waiting for someone to listen again. Lucas stared at her, the lump in his throat making it hard to speak. He hadn't even made a wish, and she had already given him something. Lucas ran his fingers over the now functional radio, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. You didn't have to do that, he murmured. Selene's eyes softened. Perhaps not, but I wanted to. He swallowed, something heavy settling in his chest. Okay, he said after a long pause. I think I know what I want for my first wish. Selene straightened, watching him intently. Lucas took a deep breath. I wish for you to be free. The words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. Selene stilled, her glowing skin pulsing faintly. Her lips parted slightly, as if she hadn't heard him correctly. Lucas. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You do not understand what you ask. Yeah, I do, he said firmly. I don't want to use you, Selene. I don't want you to be some magical servant bound to me or anyone else. I want you to be free. No more bottles, no more cosmic contracts. Just free. Selene's celestial eyes searched his face. You are different, she murmured, almost to herself. No one has ever... A sudden crackling energy surged through the room. The bottle on the counter shook violently, its glow flickering erratically. Selene's expression shifted from awe to alarm. No, Lucas, you don't understand, she said urgently. The cosmic laws, they will not allow this. Lucas barely had time to process her words before a deep tremor rumbled through the apartment. The air thickened, the temperature dropping dangerously low. Selene whirled around, her form flaring with energy. They're coming. Lucas's stomach lurched. Who's coming? Selene turned back to him, her gaze sharp and urgent. The cosmic enforcers. The temperature in the room plummeted, frost creeping up the windows. The glow surrounding Selene flickered, distorted. Lucas had no idea what a cosmic enforcer was, but from the look in Selene's galaxy-filled eyes, he knew it wasn't good. A thunderous crack split through the air, and suddenly they were no longer alone. 5 towering figures materialized in the room, their forms shifting like liquid starfire, their faces unreadable beneath swirling veils of cosmic mist. The one in the center stepped forward, its voice echoing through reality itself. Selene of the 4th Realm, you stand accused of violating the cosmic compact. You are bound by law. You cannot be freed. Lucas's blood ran cold. Selene stood her ground, her own energy surging in defiance. He made a wish. That makes it binding. The enforcer's form darkened. Then he will pay the price. The air around Lucas shattered like glass, and before he could even think to react, the universe ripped apart beneath his feet. The moment the enforcer's voice echoed through the room, reality shattered around Lucas. A force, impossibly strong, yanked him backward. His apartment, the cracked walls, the humming refrigerator, the faint scent of motor oil, vanished in a rush of white-hot light. Lucas barely had time to process what was happening before his feet hit solid ground again. But it wasn't his kitchen floor. He stumbled, disoriented, his lungs burning from the sudden change in atmosphere. Around him, the world had transformed into something impossible. A sky of endless nebulae stretched above, swirling with stars that pulsed and flickered like breathing organisms. Below, the ground was smooth black glass, stretching infinitely in every direction, reflecting the celestial expanse above. The air was thick, charged with energy, humming with an otherworldly frequency. A few feet away, Selene knelt on the glassy surface, her glow flickering, her breath ragged. Lucas turned, and his stomach lurched. The 5 cosmic enforcers stood before them, their towering, shifting forms made of pure stardust and light, radiating a force so powerful it made Lucas feel like an insect before a storm. The largest of them stepped forward, its presence crushing. "Selene of the 4th realm, your summoner has violated the cosmic balance. A Jinn cannot be freed by a mortal's wish. The laws have been broken." Selene rose slowly, her expression unreadable. "He acted with free will," she said. "That makes it binding." The enforcer's glowing form pulsed as if its entire being vibrated with barely contained fury. "Then he will face the consequences." Lucas's heart slammed in his chest as he felt the air around him tighten, pressing against him like an invisible vice. A deep, gravitational pull dragged at his bones as if he was being unmade at a molecular level. Selene's glow flared violently. "No!" she shouted, her voice shaking the entire plane. "You can't erase him." Erase? Lucas barely had time to comprehend the word before the enforcer raised an enormous, shifting hand, a swirling vortex of energy forming in its palm. Selene lunged forward, shoving Lucas aside just as the energy detonated. A blast of golden light erupted between them, knocking Lucas backward. He hit the ground hard, the glassy surface beneath him cracking like ice, sending shock waves rippling across the entire landscape. When Lucas's vision cleared, Selene stood between him and the enforcers, her form crackling with raw cosmic power. "You won't take him," she growled. The lead enforcer tilted its head, its body shifting through various forms, a humanoid silhouette, a burning star, a cloud of infinite galaxies, before settling back into its original shape. "There is another way," it said. Lucas sat up, his breath still unsteady. What do you mean?" The enforcer's glowing eyes bore into his. "You are tethered to her now, mortal. Your wish has bound your soul to hers. The balance must be restored, but it does not have to be through annihilation." Lucas swallowed hard. "What's the alternative?" For the first time, the enforcer's form dimmed slightly, as if considering its next words carefully. "A trial." Selene stiffened. "A trial?" The enforcer gestured, and suddenly, a dozen swirling portals appeared in the sky around them, each one pulsing with different hues. "These are doorways to other realities," it said. "To prove your bond is unbreakable, you must find each other in every world you enter. Each trial will strip away your memories, your identities, but if your connection is strong enough, you will always reunite." Lucas's chest tightened. "And if we fail?" The enforcer's form flared brighter. "Then you will be separated forever, and all that you were to each other will cease to exist." Silence fell. Lucas turned to Selene. "Can we do this?" Selene exhaled slowly, her glowing gaze meeting his. "There's no way to know." A pause. Then, "But I would rather risk an eternity searching for you than live a single moment knowing you were lost to me." Lucas nodded. "Then let's do it." The first time he opened his eyes, he was in a rain-soaked alleyway, neon signs flickering above him. His head pounded, a static hum pressing against his skull. "Detective Hayes?" Lucas turned. A woman in a sleek black trench coat stood before him, her piercing blue eyes oddly familiar. For some reason, his heart clenched. The second time, he awoke in a vast desert, the twin suns above beating down mercilessly. He was a pilot, a rogue smuggler trying to escape the Empire. A voice crackled through his communicator. "Hayes, if you don't get that engine running, we're dead." Lucas turned, and there she was, a warrior standing at the edge of the dunes, her silver hair whipping in the wind. The third time, he was in a medieval city, a sword strapped to his back, banners flapping in the wind. He saw her across a torch-lit ballroom, a noble woman in a dark gown, her eyes full of unspoken recognition. Again, and again, and again, no matter the world, no matter the life, they always found each other. After what felt like lifetimes, they stood before the enforcers again. Lucas wasn't sure how much time had passed, days, years, centuries. He and Celine had been reborn 100 different ways, but through every trial, their souls had recognized each other. Celine turned to Lucas, a smile touching her lips. "You really are stubborn," she murmured. Lucas smirked. "Took you long enough to figure that out." The enforcers watched them silently, before the lead one finally spoke. "You have done what no mortal and no Jinn have ever accomplished. The bond between you transcends fate. You are free from the cosmic laws that bound you." Celine let out a shaky breath, her hand tightening around Lucas's. "Then, it's over?" Lucas asked. The enforcer nodded. "You may return to your world, or explore the stars together. The choice is yours." Lucas turned to Celine. "What do you want?" Celine's galaxy-filled gaze flickered with something softer. "I want—" She hesitated. "I want to see the universe, but only if you're with me." Lucas grinned. "Then let's go see the stars." Celine raised her hand, and for the first time in eons, she wasn't bound by cosmic chains. She was truly free. A portal of pure starlight opened before them. Lucas looked at her one last time before stepping through. Together, they vanished into infinity, bound by love, adventure, and an endless sky of possibilities.